Welcome to our afternoon session. We're going to have a roundtable discussion on the opportunities and challenges for UCP and community self-protection in Africa. Our ambassador is our first panelist, but he's on the way. So we'll begin with Rosemary Kabaki. Rosemary is the head of the mission at Nonviolent Peace Force in Myanmar. Dr. Barak Muluka is a publishing editor as well as a social and political commentator on global affairs. And we have Rachel. I will not introduce them beyond that because you have the floor. You'll take it from there. Thank you.
My name's Rachel Julian. I'm a professor of peace studies at Leeds Beckett University, and I'm very honoured to be able to moderate this roundtable because I've been working in unarmed civilian protection for about 20 years now, and the one thing I've really learned is there is never enough perspectives and new ideas and new ways of thinking about this to make it work. And obviously, what we've been talking about for days and working on for years is about challenges and opportunities and how UCP works in Africa. And so this panel is us bringing in some new, different ideas and trying to look at, we've looked at what takes us forward as a network and as practitioners, what takes this forward across Africa. So I am absolutely delighted to have two, and then the Ambassador Frederic Gatetse Ngoga, who is from African Union, will be joining us. But first of all, to introduce Rosemary Kabaki, who many of you have talked to over the last few days. But she is one of the world experts on unarmed civilian protection. She's country director for Nonviolent Peace Force in South Sudan, but she's been working in this field since 2010. She's worked across Philippines, Georgia, Myanmar. She's helped set up the program in the USA and now working in South Sudan. So each panelist is going to have about 10 minutes, and then we've got some time to talk to one another and some time for questions. Okay, Rosemary. Ambassador, please. Okay.
Thank you so much.
So I was so focused on that. So delighted to. We've only just made a start, and so my name's Rachel. We met briefly earlier. I've just invited Rosemary to start. Is that okay with you? And you can take one. Okay, Rosemary, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's been such a pleasure to be part of this for the last 3 days. And even more of a pleasure to be here in this panel, which is hopefully going to be about a discussion about the opportunities for UCP and community protection systems in Africa. This is something that I'm passionate about. When I joined Nonviolent Peace Force many years ago, I told you a little bit of a history of how I joined Nonviolent Peace Force before we started. The bishop of my church, which is the Anglican Church, asked me, when you go there, when they have taught you how to do this, please come back. Please come and bring that learning because we need it here. And that was the start of my journey. What Rachel has talked about going all the way around. I'm so pleased to be in South Sudan because I feel like what I was asked to go and do, I have started on the journey, and I'm very pleased that this journey is not by myself and that you are part of this journey with me. Unarmed civilian protection in Africa, the opportunities. The opportunities, I feel, come from the challenges that we are experiencing in Africa. I always like quoting one of the founders of Nonviolent Peace Force, who always starts his presentation by saying, the nature of conflict and violence has changed in the last decades. That traditionally, in very many communities, when communities had conflict, and that was going to lead into violence, most likely the young men generally would go out to a specific predetermined area, have a fight. Have you all watched those movies? yeah? They have a fight, they have a winner, and then they come back to the communities. In the last 100 years or so, this conflict is no longer out there, it's within us, in our communities. The fighting happens where women and children live, where we farm, where we try to educate our children. This is where the conflict is coming in. And therefore, the traditional forms of protecting communities no longer work to take care of the needs of the civilians. Because predominantly in the scenario that I just talked about, the civilians were then protected by being separated from the violence that has become from the conflict. But once the conflict is within the communities, then the traditional methods of taking arms to engage in the violence inevitably leads to the ones who suffer most, the ones who did we agree on the survivors who have to survive this are the civilians who live in those communities. So having guns within us, of course, traditionally we understand security has always been get people, arm them, and then everybody's safe and our communities are safe. Unfortunately now, the very, very security forces in many parts of Africa that should be protecting communities are the perpetrators of the violence and need to be addressed so that they don't no longer protect their communities with the understanding of what the community is. This creates a perfect opportunity for unarmed civilian protection. As we have all heard in various presentations in the last 3 days, communities have developed and have always developed self-protection strategies, relationship building, creating safer spaces, going and intervening, interpositioning themselves in front of the perpetrators of violence. And these strategies that have always been there are the strategies that are the most powerful at this stage. Because in order for communities to be protected, we need to use these methodologies. And then, and this is the perfect bit, and I'm really happy Ambassador is here, because we then need to link these community self-protection strategies to the structured protection systems that are already there. So the initial stage is to have and recognize this. Why have I said that the first thing I understood about UCP is something that I already knew? I said that earlier. Communities already know this. And when we talked about unarmed civilian protections, in all the places that Rachel just talked about, I have never found a community that did not have community protection strategies. Never. And I suspect if I go to many other countries, I will find the same thing. What the communities use to protect themselves in the Philippines may be different strategies than the ones I have found in Myanmar, or I find in South Sudan, or I have heard from Palestine. But nevertheless, it is already inbuilt. What has been lacking, and this is why I'm really proud to be a part of Nonviolent Peace Force, is the recognition that there is power, that there is a place for community self-protection strategies that we ignore. Our security actors, we look for Mama Halan to go and talk to the communities. They recognize her power. But that's not recognized enough for capacity building to be put in place. And this is very crucial for us to understand that, so that we don't have isolated community protection groups, but they become a cohesive, a much more powerful structure that we could move along with. And this is the place for this right now in Africa. I was chatting with some of my colleagues, some of the young ones like Clinton. I remember Pan-Africanism with Nkrumah, right? 70s and 80s. There's a feel of Pan-Africanism right now that is powerful, that is going across the whole continent, that you feel it in every area, whether you're going to the Sahel, whether you're here in the East African area, whether you're moving to the West African area, you can feel the Pan-African movement. And it is made out of civilians and the role that civilians can play. And this gives us the opportunity to then strengthen and ensure that the next structures we put in place with this Pan-Africanism looks to empower the role of community protection structures. I find that when we talk about unarmed civilian protection, the main key area to look at, I love it most because it does direct protection. We talked about that. People interposition themselves. People help the communities to move out of the area. This is absolutely and perfect. And in and of itself, it's fantastic. I think that makes people heroes. I no longer watch Sylvester Stallone in movies. I know the heroes are there on the ground. But it's not enough. Because when we think about it, these structures make sure that we are disempowered by making us unsafe. Because when communities are unsafe, they do not follow up to address other security needs. So it's important to keep them safe. So that's the first step, that every area we create safer spaces to enable a discourse, a discussion on the next step forward. And the next step forward is really linking and engaging organizations and structures that hopefully the ambassador is going to let us have around. So for example, ECOWAS has a wonderful early warning, early response structure that is in place. But that's for the big things. If you're living in a village in Kenya, if you're living in a village in Nigeria, what ECOWAS is doing may not feel like it's directly impacting you. That therefore we need to put early warning, early response structures for every concern that the communities have and all the work that we've been talking about. So that's the first step. And then you tell me about time, right? The biggest concern right now, and I'll tell you why I'm in Nairobi after this workshop, I'm not going back to Juba. Because climate change has become a fundamental concern. So we have communities in very many areas in Juba that I can see that are displaced because of the ongoing conflict. But then where they are, it floods. The Nile leaves its normal area on its way to Egypt. I understand that's where it likes to go. And instead goes into the communities. So now the communities not only cannot address their basic needs because of the conflict, but the little that they can do, climate change has come to exacerbate what is already ongoing. So the intersectionality between climate change and UCP is fundamental. And we watch countries like Chad, for example, where we can see the instability is building up and you can see the root cause of what's going to happen in the next stage of displacement, of conflict, of human beings dying because all their human rights are not addressed, is directly related to climate change. And this brings us to the second bit of unarmed civilian protection. Prevention, and somebody talked about it over there. The reason I stayed in Myanmar for 8 years, it takes time. I want to say this again, it takes time. You need to invest, the communities need to invest with you. You need to take time and unpack what is going on. So one of the country directors, when I joined Myanmar, told me, because I was running, I could see the problems and the pain. And he said, the problem in Myanmar has taken 60 years to get where it is. It will take 60 years to unpack it. And when I heard the question asked by Flora about South Sudan and the Maasai presentation that was given here, that's what I thought. What has it taken for Maasai communities who have the similar profile with so many communities in South Sudan, to be able to sit opposite each other and say, you gave me a cow 3 generations ago. And the other person, the other protagonist says, yes, I did. But the cow you gave me got 10 calves, I'm not going to give you. They're negotiating, are they not? What steps are necessary to do this unpacking? So the issue of using UCP as a preventative, when we talked about the early warning, let's not wait until it explodes in us. One of my colleagues in Myanmar and I sat and looked at all the UCP methodologies that not only we were using, but our colleagues across the world. And at that time, we got 27 methodologies. And we then unpacked to see which ones can you use before the conflict becomes violent. The ones you can use whilst violence is ongoing, and the ones you can use after. We found 4. Only when you're fighting, you can only use 4. You can only save, you can only remove, and it was shocking for us because we thought UCP should be able to help at this stage. But oddly enough, we found it most ineffective other than saving lives at that particular time and building relationships. Because when you're saving lives, it gives you an opportunity to meet key actors, to meet the military, sometimes the perpetrators of violence. You have to negotiate with them so that you can save life and you can use this later. The most powerful time we can be, and I'm ringing the bell about climate change, now, before it happens, before it explodes on us, this is when we have more methodologies of UCP that we could use in order to mitigate, prevent, minimize the impact of the conflict that we can see happening. Am I okay at the 10 minutes?
That's lovely.
I usually talk a lot, so I'm really happy.
No, that's fantastic. It's really very interesting and Seti, fantastic, raising many challenges. Ambassador, it would be a great pleasure for us if you could talk. So this is Ambassador Frederic Gatatetseri-Ngoga? Okay, Ngoga. Okay, super. And he's Senior Advisor for International Partnerships in the African Union. And I'd like to say that the reason I wrote to you in reaching out, and for me it's really important that we connect with so many people, is because I read that the idea of a social peace and the proper representation and inclusion of people, if we're to get peace, is something that you're interested in and things like that. So I was very pleased that there's that going on. And I know you have a wide experience through peacekeeping in Somalia, across the African Union. So it would be, if you would be able to share your thoughts on opportunities and challenges as for protecting civilians in Africa, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And first of all, I apologize. I came a bit late. And usually I don't like to speak in the afternoon because I call it the graveyard shift. After people had had lunch, to keep their attention is always very difficult. But I'm very pleased to, because this is a subject that is close to my heart. I was actually, for the last 8 years, the head of conflict prevention and early warning within the African Union. So I was talking about this, and I know, nice meeting you as well. So we ran the whole, and by the way, on the African continent, we have a very sophisticated early warning system, which actually gets the information, civil society organization, they give it to regional economic communities or regional mechanism, and then it feeds into the continental organization. And I can tell you this with confidence. There is not a single conflict that we have not seen coming. Not a single one. The problem has never been early warning. The problem has been early response. The will by the politician to tackle the problems. Because the signs are always there. Even the conflicts that we're seeing today, I can tell you at this point where I'm sitting here that I can see about 17 conflicts that are about to happen on the African continent. You don't have to be a genius to know about it. When you see a country which has a history of violating human rights, you know that country is at risk. When you see a country that has a problem with inclusivity, you know that country is at risk. By the way, we all talk about inclusivity, but I often ask people, how do you measure inclusivity? And no one to this point, has ever been able to tell me how to measure inclusivity. Because what do politicians do? They will say, oh, you know what? In this country, we have 44 tribes. So we are going to appoint someone who represents one of the tribes, someone who comes from those tribes in one of these positions, and then we'll say we have inclusivity. No, that's not inclusivity. Because even that person was not elected by his own to represent them. So if you have a country that has a history of military coup d'etats, you have a country that is vulnerable. Because people always go back to what they know best. And if you have a country which has a socioeconomic malaise, you are at risk of a conflict. You don't have to be a genius. When I say socioeconomic malaise, I'm talking about, I think it was Madam who was talking about, in many of our countries, those who own the security forces are the perpetrators of violence. And if you look at people joining violent extremist groups, the number one thing that they say is that they join violent extremist groups because they suffered violence from the state. So this, if you have a socioeconomic malaise, and if you have, like we're having now in many African countries, high inflation rates, where we have a crisis of growth, a crisis of financing, a cocktail where government keeps taxing the citizens because they have no other ways of mobilizing local resources to fund, to pay off their debt, you have a problem. And last but not least, if you have leaders who have overstayed their time in power, you will have a problem. So these are things that are there, and we should not shy away from it. The other time I was being told that, I hope there's Chatham House rules here somewhat.
Yes.
Not exactly.
We've been filmed.
Okay,
So.
that's very good. So I cannot mention some member states, but there are some countries where we have leaders who are over a certain age, or who are even physically not well, and we all see it. And we are expecting them to make life decision, and sometimes it's even, I find it very interesting to see someone from yesterday talking about tomorrow, talking about the future, AI, and so on and so forth. I mean, at best, you have a certain age, you know, you need to be realistic in terms of what it is. But I would also like to say a few things regarding civilian protection. In many of the conflict situations where I have been, and in many countries in the world for that matter, there are indigenous mechanisms which exist. And these indigenous mechanisms, when you go and you look, they were sophisticated mechanisms. The other day I talked about the crisis of the state being the #1 challenge that we have on the continent today. And then the notion of a state for many of us is the same way that Germany is organized, or France, or the UK. But if you go into many of our countries, they had very sophisticated systems before colonialism and so on and so forth. And if you think about it, if we are going to go back to, if we are going to recreate a state, we need to inspire ourselves with what already existed there. Many people don't know that countries like, which are hailed today about being successful, like the Rwandan system. Everybody talks about Rwanda. It's not perfect. But what did they do? They went and looked back during the monarchy, how their country was organized, how justice was rendered. You've all have heard about the Gacaca, right? The Gacaca system. That was a traditional indigenous mechanism. In my country, I did not know, and I discovered this more recently, we had a leadership school for those who are going to lead the country. And they will call it Gusasa. Gusasa meant that if you are going to be a leader, you will spend time with a prince, with different princes until you reach the king. So from each prince you will learn basic leadership skills. So these schools of leadership, you know, there were indigenous mechanisms which existed there, and I think that it's important. And at the heart of it all was the sanctity of human life. There is even a saying that human life is like water. Once you have spilled it, you can't take it back. So, and this is not only, you find it in the Sahel, you find it everywhere. There are indigenous mechanisms that exist out there. Now, what have we been doing at the AU, for example, in terms of, because I think it's important to mention what we've been doing. For example, we have adopted very strong normative frameworks. Now, when people hear normative frameworks, they're like, what is this again? These are talking shop and so on. No, actually, these are important documents that guide us when we are intervening. We have what we call Human Rights Due Diligence Policy, HRDDP. Have you heard about that? And we have strong child protection policies. We even have actually within the AU Peace and Security Council a cluster that looks into child protection. It currently is chaired by the Gambia. And we look at basically how do you protect children in conflict. One of the tragedies of the different conflicts that are happening today in the world is that actually all these norms that we have adopted are no longer respected. Children now are casualties. Sexual exploitation and abuse. We have been talking about this forever and a day, yet rape continues to be a preferred weapon of war. You know, we've been talking about gender-based violence, how gender-based violence actually kills a society. You know, but yet, just open the news today in Kenya, you look at the number of violence that's going on. What is wrong with us? So it means that somehow something has gone wrong with our values, and we are trying to really have these norms which are based on our most basic values in terms of what we can do. But we have done something else. We have created a platform to engage civil society organizations. It's called Net for Peace. So we listen to the voices of those who are not necessarily in government. 2 days ago, I think it's the professor she said something which I liked very much, that it's not the state that makes peace, it's the people that makes peace. And so we figured that the best way to do that is to engage the people, the organizations. And it's been quite useful because we run out of ideas. People always think that we have a lot of brilliant ideas. No, sometimes we run out of ideas in terms of how to deal with geopolitics and conflict and so on and so forth. So we have the Net for Peace. In peacekeeping, we have also created what we call the CCTARC. CCTARC, it's called the Civilian Casualty Tracking Cell. Why have we created the Civilian Casualty Tracking Cell? It's because in the UN, you have peacekeeping missions. But for us, we have peace enforcement missions, which means we go into combat. And when you go into combat, there is likely to be casualties. So you want to make sure that you have a mechanism to track whether or not you are creating casualties, or if there is a potential for having casualties. And also have mechanism whereby you can establish what we call a board of inquiries and punish the culprits. We even have mobile courts for soldiers who are fighting in those areas. When we were fighting to liberate Mogadishu, of course, you can imagine that you're fighting with a terrorist organization. There is also sort of an unconventional mechanism of what they do. They would, for example, shell densely populated areas. What they would be hoping for is that we respond and fire back in the densely populated areas. So we will kill civilians if we do that, and then they will win them over. So we had to figure out how do we neutralize them without necessarily having casualties. We have not always been successful, but we have tried our level best, and where there has been problems, we have always had soldiers punished, and I think you've seen some of this happening. So at the heart of everything that we do is really civilians, in terms of what we're looking into. I would just like to point out to something else. Have you heard about the new Agenda for Peace? Yes, the UN New Agenda for Peace. Okay, good. I encourage everybody to go and read it. The UN is very good at coming up with new terms, but we need those things. But when the new Agenda for Peace came about, they asked us in the AU what we thought about the new Agenda for Peace. And so we had a few things that we suggested to the Secretary General. Number one is the primacy of politics. No matter what you do, even these mechanisms you're talking about, madam, the communities, where there are humans, there are leaders. Where there are leaders, there is politics. The primacy of politics is extremely important. And that is where we need to put the accent. All these conflicts, imagine, now that I'm still talking about Al-Shabaab, what we discovered was that the places where Al-Shabaab was, that there was an initial dispute between communities over things like banana trade over things like charcoal or most basic things which created tension between two communities. And so the terrorist organization, because of the weakness of the state, will come and take advantage of that and strengthen their presence by telling the Uwike clan, you raise the flag of the Tawhid, and then I will defend you. So the primacy of politics. Secondly, it's for us, we propose what we call peace enforcement, not peacekeeping. Peacekeeping in the Congo, MONUSCO was there for almost 20 years. They're wrapping up. They're actually exiting. Civilians could be killed 6 kilometers from where they were, but they could not intervene because of the rules of engagement. So we say no. For us, what we want is peace enforcement, because at the end of the day, someone needs to have the monopoly of violence. And if there is no monopoly of violence, and this is something actually I was thinking about, then you have communities which pick up arms to defend themselves. And the day you have that is the day you have the number one danger, because you have militias. Anyone who picks up weapons and who's not the state is a militia. And then the chances of inter-militia infighting is very high. So the state must always have the monopoly of violence. Regardless of what we think, they must have the monopoly of violence. The third thing which we told the Secretary General, which we think is extremely important, when we talk about reconciliation, people find it's a boring thing. Oh, reconciliation, everybody talks about reconciliation, it's a boring thing. But I can guarantee you that if there is no reconciliation in a society, whatever you're building on sand. You're building on sand. And reconciliation, it is basically summoning the better angels of our communities to surpass the hurt and the wounds that you've had. If a woman in rural Rwanda who was impregnated by genocidaires can forgive them after they have killed her entire family, who are we not to be able to do so? But the other point, last point that is linked to this, is that reconciliation also must happen in tandem with justice. Let no one lie to you. There needs to be some sort of justice. And I need to be able to know who hurt my people so that I can at least choose to forgive them or not. That has to happen there. So justice remains important. Two other points, and I'm concluding. I come back to we need strong states, and I kept talking about this, and we need to go back to the indigenous mechanism that we had to be able to look into what we need. Last but not least, we need strong partnerships. There is not a single organization or a single entity that can do it alone. The challenges we have are so enormous, and my sister was talking about climate change. Did you know that the first conflict of climate change started where? In Darfur. That was the first conflict which was caused by climate change. Most people don't know this, but it was Darfur, the first conflict. And today, climate change is creating so many displacement, and when there are people who are displaced, what ends up happening is that they put strain in the communities which are welcoming them. So it creates tension and friction, and it creates conflict. So we need everybody to work together. I was telling the European Union a couple of weeks ago when I was in Brussels, I said to them, you want to stop migration? Let's work together to address the matters at the root cause before they can get to your end. So yes, so we need smart partnerships. There are things that we need to do together. I mean, I can talk about this subject on and on forever and a day, but I would love for people to be able to ask questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting, and also that there are sort of like mechanisms that you're looking at and involved in, and also that these are being considered across many different forums. Thank you so much for your contribution. So we will have some time after Dr. Barak has spoken where you can share responses and things. But finally, thank you very much to our third panelist, Dr. Barak Mulaweka, and a scholar across many different disciplines. So Doctor of Philosophy and Politics and International Relations, specialising in migration studies, and you did a Master's in Forced Migration and in the University of Nairobi, but you also study across mass communication and linguistics. So bringing all of these multiple perspectives, please share your contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. And thank you, Ambassador. And thank you, Rosemary. And of course, the rest of the delegates. I've listened for the past 2 days and today as well. And I think it has all been said. And so I will just attempt to gather the balls, see whether it's possible to telescope it and help to bring it home. As there isn't much that is left that is new. And I pick it up from my two very competent and eloquent colleagues here this evening, where emphasis then is placed on 3 items that we are talking about: assistance of civilians or assistance to civilians who are in violent confrontation situations. We are talking about prevention, and we are talking about protection. We have heard about the state, and the ambassador has said that the state must always be there, it must always be strong. And I think that is where the challenge really begins, because the state indeed is understood to be there, serving not itself or its own ends, but serving the people, serving the population. That's why, for instance, in the Kenyan context, we talk about the state as an organ that is created by the Constitution. But that same Constitution begins by recognizing that all sovereignty emanates from the people. It belongs to the people. The self-same people who end up being civilians in conflict, or who end up being displaced persons within their own countries, or who end up as refugees ultimately when they no longer can trust the state to protect them. And there are 2 challenges here. The first challenge pertains to a state that becomes rogue. The state in exercising sovereignty is expected to be protecting the people. But at some point, the state, in its exercise of its monopoly of violence, becomes the rogue. It becomes the dragon. And so the danger and the harm that people are afraid of is not something that is coming from us or coming from some hostile neighboring community as in a different country. In the post-World War II context, a lot of conflicts that we are witnessing around the globe, with very few exceptions, are internal conflicts. Traditionally, people fought against enemies from different countries or different nations. But we increasingly see people fighting within the same nations, that they are competing perhaps for opportunities and resources within those nations. In the process, the state identifies and defines, or state actors identify and define segments of the population as the enemies, and they are enemies not to be engaged in conversations, but enemies to be crushed. And as that is happening then, there is also resistance, and Ambassador is spot on, that at some point then the civilian populations or sometimes, as happened in Sudan, a detachment of the military redefines itself and takes up arms against the state. And so you have two sets of combatants that were initially one unit, and falling somewhere in between are civilians who take the brunt of the beating. A few years ago, one of my younger sisters was working in the Central African Republic, and she was working for the International Red Cross. Every 3 to 4 weeks, she would come back home, and we would wonder why she was going back, because of the kinds of narratives that she shared with us. And quite often after she has gotten back, we would be conversing on text, on WhatsApp, and she would be saying things like, "These thugs, I wish they could stop fighting for 1 or 2 hours. I cannot even sleep." The concern was not that they were fighting or killing each other. The concern was that they were disrupting people's sleep. That the danger of getting inured to conflict situations, to armed conflict, to armed violence, is very real. Sometimes we would receive images of people shooting each other, and there are civilians watching almost as if it's a football match between two teams, or a bullfighting session such as we have in West Kenya, where I come from. We follow the bulls as they are fighting, and we run around the field watching them until eventually one of the bulls gives in and takes off. And you have civilian populations that are actually towing these fellows. They are coming in tow to see how these people are fighting. This happens especially in situations where conflicts have been forgotten. It's one of the biggest challenges, I submit, that people can fight for a very long time until the rest of the world, even sometimes the rest of the country where that fighting is not taking place, forget that there is conflict somewhere within their own spaces. Here in Kenya, for example, we get to hear every so often about people we call cattle rustlers, and we will hear that they have struck some place in the Rift Valley. We will hear that a number of people have been killed by bandits, and it's just a passing item sometimes on TV footage, until some journalists, like my friend Alex here, will brave it out to go and do a thorough documentary. Then for a few weeks, there will be focus on that thing. There will be some tough talking by the state actors from the very top. The president may make certain pronouncements. The Minister for Interior may put on military fatigues and visit that place. Never mind that he has no training in military tactics. He'll go there and do a bit of tough talking and come back and tell us now we have crushed them. Then it will resurface. And so we understand that naturally there will be banditry in Kapedo. We understand that there will be banditry in Pokot, in Turkana, and that is normal. Unfortunately, it's not normal because people are dying, people are being killed. So the collapse of the state is the other dimension. One dimension, of course, having been, I see Raquel is trying to rig me out. What she doesn't know is that I was looking at the watch when the others were speaking. Yeah. So that then is a challenge of the state. The state itself needs to be stable, but the state itself needs also to be put on a short rein. It needs to be reined in. And we can rein it in by sharing information on what is happening. I have had some very enlightening and very refreshing examples from this forum. I've heard about codes of communications, that when you see certain grass in certain formations at a certain point, you know what it's telling you. When you see the 3 cooking stones in a certain environment, in a certain manner, they are telling you something. And that must be picked up to be escalated to another level, because eventually the protection that civilians can exercise among themselves is very temporary. It needs to get out to the outside world that something is happening in this environment, and good Samaritans must come in from outside to be able then to secure the peace, the security, the safety that the civilians have put in place. When we had violent eruptions in this country, and sometimes when you say when we had violent eruptions, Kenyans must wonder which ones is he talking about, because there's a whole catalogue of them from 1988 to fairly recently. Now we just have a few short breaks, and then we get back to those violences. But when those eruptions were there in 2007, it took the intervention of international good Samaritans whom we could trust from both sides to put us around the table to sort out our differences. And so the word must eventually get out there. It must move from the grass perhaps to the internet, through other channels, so that we then have others who come in to assist to bring the violence to an end. And within that context, finally, we need to recognize as the international community that those who exercise state power, state authority, including state violence, do so in trust for the rest of humanity. Situations in which the state has become rogue or the state has collapsed call for a fresh look at the instruments that govern the global sovereign order. Thank you.
Thank you very much. These are really important points there, and I could see both you, Rosemary, and Ambassador both things like that. Would you like a minute to respond or comment on any of those? Otherwise, we'll be able to hear from the floor if the ideas. Yeah, of course, please.
I don't want to set off an African Union protest. Just one comment that you made, and you've made a reference to that, which strikes me. I would like a paradigm shift in for example, the state believing that they must have the monopoly of violence. I'd like a paradigm shift to the state must have the monopoly of conflict resolution. And there was a time Nonviolent Peace Force had this logo thing: conflict is inevitable, violence is not. And I think if we can change that attitude, we would then not have our own police force, our own military, our own community members looking to attack us, whether in a violent way, that they are aiming to come for conflict resolution, hopefully not leading to violence. I think that would be a key proposal from one NGO sector. Conflict is inevitable, but violence is not. Conflict is inevitable, violence is not. I have conflict with my siblings, I have conflict with my children, etc., etc. Conflict is inevitable. With ourselves, yes. And it's, I want to say that it's a paradigm shift. And in regards to the way we perceive violence, as I made a joke about not watching Sylvester Stallone in a movie. When I grew up, this is how you protected people. And we admired that. Pick up a gun, shoot them down, and it was really great. Until I look at what we are talking about and listening to presentations from, particularly I look at our group from Palestine, who have protected their people for generations using nonviolent means, and I've as yet to see people building up monuments for that kind of intervention. I think it makes a big difference. And the other thing that strikes me also is it's come across a lot that we cannot do this alone. You've said this. And I think it came out also from this workshop. As much as, if I may talk about NP South Sudan, it's been there for a while. We've done UCP with 2,000, 3,000 South Sudanese. The population of South Sudan is in the millions. We cannot then say we are the UCP organization. We do what we can, and we link and we coordinate and we see what is going on next. I would also like to ask also with the state whether it's conflict resolution or violence that they have a monopoly on, who will bail the cat? I loved that story when I was a kid. It is concerning for me to hear that a representative from the African Union would state that some of the policies are not being ignored. Why is that concerning for me? Because if the African Union is not sure what to do, then my country, Kenya, is not sure what to do. And then by the time I'm getting down to the village, we are leaving the problem of that resolution to the communities, because they are the ones who have to deal with the child protection issues. Because the state's not taking responsibility, the African Union doesn't take responsibility, and the international community broader than that will then say, oh, we can't do much. So that is a bit of concern. And there has been a note, some of the countries in Africa have started withdrawing, calling in even UN bodies. Because like, you've been here for 20 years. We've not seen any change. We do know that there is unarmed civilian protection, by the way, for information, in the UN mission in South Sudan. They have UCP. But any conversation I've tended to have with members of UNMISS to ask them, how are you doing UCP? We need to help build their capacity to do it. And we are the ones who can do it, because we practice UCP. As we saw in all the presentations here, we see it, we recognize it, and maybe we need to support the armed security agents in understanding the role of UCP, even as they carry arms.
Thank you, Rosemary. Ambassador.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rosemary. As Rosemary was talking about Sylvester Stallone, I was thinking about how during my father's generation, they didn't have like movie theater, but they were having these magazines, and it was about Martin Luther King, it was about Gandhi, it was about them. It was not about violence. And what they called a hero, a courageous man, was the one who would be courageous enough to have dialogue and to not puff their chest, because they understood that we're here temporary on this earth and that we better leave it as a better place than what we found it. So I think we need to get there to even teach our children that, you know what, the hero is, or the heroine is the one who actually can sit down and really have a civilized conversation, have disagreements, but really find ways of resolving matters. The professor, as the professor was talking, and Rosemary as well, I was thinking to myself that the number one ways of doing peace is to be honest with yourself. I think it starts with honesty. And I will not sit here and tell you that, oh, we are doing this and that. No, because first and foremost, who is the UN, who is the AU? Who is IGAD? Who is the EAC? It is the member states, not the Secretariat. So the Secretariat can suggest things, but until the member states themselves decide those things, you can't do anything. And if we want to change how things are done, it begins with our participation in politics. We want to run away from it, but if we don't take care of it, it will take care of us. And this is the challenge in many of our countries. Those who are supposed to be running are not running. Those who have no business of running are the ones who are in the forefront. And we find ourselves in difficulties. So I think that we need to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, how do we create an environment where we can have competitive and constructive politics without people feeling that they're going to be attacked or their lives are going to be at risk. I think it's extremely important. Last but not least, Prof, I would like to tell you something. A couple of years ago, we were having internal conflicts, but now we are back at conflicts between states. I can tell you today, as I speak to you, in the East African community, we had disputes between Kenya and Tanzania, Kenya and Uganda, Burundi and Rwanda, DRC and Rwanda, and so on and so forth. Ethiopia, Somalia. The other day, there's even tensions between Angola, Gabon. In the Sahel, I'm not even talking about it. Now we are back at that level of countries actually quarreling among themselves. But why is that? Sometimes nothing rallies people around the flag like an external enemy. So some of our politicians are also very crafty in terms of actually creating those things. But anyway, let me stop here. We can go on for...
Thank you, yeah. So we have some time for questions or comments and reflections. There we go, Juliet's just there. And I think thinking about, so like when we've talked over the last few days, been very much around this horizontal engaging with communities. And part of this debate is thinking about the role of the state and the intergovernmental organisations and that vertical engagement. And I think you've all given us a lot to think about on that. So thank you very much.
So Rachel, allow us to take about 4 questions, then we can take a break. Agreed?
Thank you so much. I am Moses Mande from South Sudan. The discussion was really very rich, and I noted almost or most of what the panelists have said, and actually relevant to what is happening in Africa right now. So my question is, if we look at Africa, and if we observe carefully, most of the conflicts in Africa are actually directly and indirectly created, manipulated, and sustained by governments, not by people. Okay? That's my observation. You can prove me wrong, but actually that's in one way what is happening. So my question is, why do you think this is happening? How do the governments benefit from conflicts? We all know that at some point Africans were actually pushed to fight among themselves to allow others benefit from the resources of the continent. So are our leaders playing the same game that others have played against us as Africans in order to exploit this continent? So that's the question I am trying to ask. To our UCP colleague, if we are to be objective also as UCP practitioners, we should also be proactive. Because when countries get into conflict, that's when we get more active to do our UCP. And even after the UCP, after the conflict is silenced, we continue with our UCP. Now the question to ourselves, including myself, because I have been also asking myself, when can we move from this kind of situation? Because otherwise we will be playing the same game. Because conflicts can be opportunities for us to work, and get busy also. How can we move from this position, from this comfort zone, into a situation where we can engage with colleagues at the African Union so that conflicts can actually be prevented right from there, And I'm happy Ambassador actually said already around 17 countries in Africa, they are likely to actually experience armed conflict, if not civil wars. That means we have something to do actually right now, before those conflicts erupt into violence, and then we start to get busy to actually involve. That's the question I am putting forward. Otherwise, I really appreciate it, all your contributions. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all the speakers. I find that to have been very helpful. I have a question about governance. From the ambassador's perspective, and I think also from UCP perspective, looking at the African continent, the distrust in electoral processes, and manipulation of electoral systems, and this is now spreading all over the world. I think people are not trusting electoral systems, or even just systems of citizen participation. And what that has done is that it has marginalized majority of the populations, ending up with leaders who have very less interest in securing social cohesion for the countries. So I don't know whether at the level of African Union, Ambassador, this has been discussed. We don't necessarily need to die with democracy, and that's my conviction from my peace studies perspective. We did do the evaluation, 10-year evaluation with the conflict prevention of IGAD, early warning. They came to Ekima University College, and we looked at the 10 years of monitoring conflict and working towards prevention, and what were the specific gaps that were there. I think the disconnect between conflict monitors and our leaders at the top levels of the governance was very obvious. So I think it'll be good to have that conversation. Alternative systems of governance, increasing citizen participation and inclusion, which you've talked about, I think is very important. But thank you.
Well, my name is Kelvin. I'm from Strathmore, student undertaking international studies. I would like to ask concerning the AU representative on the Somaliland and the Ethiopia. Recently, as you have been told right now, there was tensions between Somalia and the Somaliland. And as Madam Rosemary was saying, if we don't do anything, it might escalate, and will it depend on the UN or our own Africans to resolve this conflict before it turns into violence? So my question was, is really the AU taking a stand on what is happening, or are they just there for these 20 years, looking at it and waiting for it to unfold? That's what I wanted to ask.
Sorry to take up the last question. Thank you so much for this panel and for the inputs. I also wanted to ask for a paradigm shift, especially at the African Union, and some way of getting there. So I've studied, I started my PhD and then my career looking at international peace building and state building interventions, mainly in the Balkans and then Afghanistan. And what you can find from critical studies of this is you can see that top-down interventions do not always bring peace. You can explain why state-building interventions do not build democratic states, and you see all these relapses and so on. So from a critical perspective, you get very desperate at some point and think, what can we do? That's the point when I discovered unarmed civilian protection, which I think is both kind of a practical critique and an alternative to thinking about some of these problems that we have in conflict, especially the harm that's done to civilians. Now, the paradigm shift I think we need is to take as a starting point, not always the state. I think all three of you have talked about how the state is always, not always, but quite often the problem more than the solution. We can't wait for the state to be fixed in many cases. But how do we take people as the starting point? And how do we not think about peace enforcement as the starting point, but actually non-violent strategies? So we shift from violence to non-violence, how that can be achieved. I was wondering whether there's anything the African Union could do. It seems to me like almost it would be an amazing decolonizing move if the African Union took the lead, not just in suggesting to the Secretary General at the United Nations some other measures that could be done, or being more forceful, but actually to come up with something completely new and to really put proactive nonviolence at the center. I think that would be amazing, and I wonder whether there's any way of building those linkages more between what I understand is a very high-level body run by states, but also then those communities that already practice this paradigm shift and show how it can be done differently. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's 4 very challenging and large questions. So would you like to first respond to some of those?
Let me try.
Yeah, there you go.
But let me try with the last question, and I'll go up. Yes, I think the reality is that we have what we call Agenda 2063. I don't know if anyone has read about it, because people think that it's far and then they don't read it. But if you look at Agenda 2063, it has aspirations, and it has an action plan over 1-year action plan, 3-year, 10-year action plan. And actually it puts at the heart of it, you know, the human being and so on and so forth. So it is there, but we need to amplify those voices and maybe involve more the communities. The good news is that all of us who work for the African Union, we come from communities. And all of us have had experience with conflict one way or the other. So I take your idea and I like it, but you're right. We need a non-violent way. We need that movement so that even leaders, you know, the first point of call is dialogue, not puffing their chest and so on and so forth, because this is what we're seeing increasingly. On the Somaliland, my brother, let me tell you, we've been seized with that from day one. In fact, we've even had an AU Peace and Security Council meeting, and more recently there was an IGAD meeting where the chairperson of the African Union was also present to address this matter. And for us, the starting point is what we call the Cairo Declaration. The Cairo Declaration talks about the intangibility of borders. You know, the borders we inherited at independence, you don't touch them. And the reason why we insist on this matter, there is only 2 countries which have actually been independent since, who secured independence since, you know, since the 60s. It was Eritrea and it was South Sudan. And all of you know the process that we went through. The fear is that, you know, we have mechanism of how to address certain historical injustices that we inherited from the Berlin Conference. But it is through dialogue. It is not through unilateral decisions. So I would encourage you to go and look at the communique of IGAD, which came out from the IGAD summit. It was on the 19th. So it's really recent. And also encourage you to look at the AU Peace and Security Council communique, which outlined clearly how this conflict should be resolved. And they basically gave us marching orders, and we're working towards that. we are trying to de-escalate as much as possible. No one can afford another conflict between any other country. And this one in particular will be dangerous because it will be going into uncharted territory, whereby one country decides that, you know, they're going to infringe, you know, one way or the other on someone else's sovereignty. So this is something that we need to be very careful about. So you'll be seeing, we have the AU Summit coming up on the 17th and 18th of February. There will be a lot of discussions on these matters, just to give you that. On citizen participation and governance, I completely agree with you. Our electoral mechanism, and the AU actually has an electoral observer mission for every elections that happen. But for some reason, you know, I don't know how I don't participate in them, and it's a principal position that I have made. We go in them, and they always say that, yes, it was not perfect, but it's credible enough, you know? The issue is, how do we fix our electoral management bodies? Because really, that is where the heart of the problem is. And it starts with simple things like registration of the voters. Once you get the registration wrong, everything else, you have it wrong. But how do we learn from countries that have succeeded? You have countries like the Netherlands, in Europe, or Sweden. They have elections every other week or 2 weeks, I don't know. They're changing governments constantly. How can we learn from their system? But no one questions their mechanism, right? How can we learn from them? But then again, you have superpowers like the US, where till now Trump still talks about rigging the elections, the system that was flawed. So as a global community, how do we come up with a system that people can trust, that we can deliver really what the will of the people are? The other time there was elections in Congo, and really there were situations where you had even some people having their machines in their own homes and computing. No, I mean, these are things that are out there, everybody to see. He delivered a winner. They delivered a winner, and they told people to go to court, to go and, you know, where there are challenges. And by the way, they're trying very hard to actually address these things, which I think is interesting. But how can people have trust in such systems? You know, we have about 18 elections this year, and tough ones, by the way. We started with Comoros at the beginning of the year, and till now, there's still riots going on, and they're trying to address them. We have Senegal, which is coming up. It's going to be a tough one. We have actually Chad will come up as well. And this morning, I was listening to the news. They're already challenging the composition of the Electoral Commission. So if you start by challenging the composition of the Electoral Commission body, that means even the results, you are going to reject them to begin with. We have South Sudan. Everybody have been talking about South Sudan, which is supposed to go into election. And certain things have not been put in place, which were supposed to be put in place. What happens if an election doesn't take place? Do you go into transition? And there are more and more cases like this that I can talk about, but we really need to look into how do we have electoral management bodies which are credible to all of us. Last but not least, and I don't want to monopolize the floor, my brother from South Sudan talked about the fact that there are external actors who actually are there, and also some of our governments actually also fueling the fire. I'll tell you something, every time that I hear that there are external actors fueling a conflict, it is true, but I struggle with it very much, because it means we don't have agency as a people, as Africans. It means we can't say no. It means we can't say, you know, don't impose this on me. And unfortunately, many of the conflicts we are seeing today, actually, we used to have superpowers. Now we have what we call middle powers, who are increasingly playing an important role. Let me conclude by saying that yesterday I saw former president of the DRC, Joseph Kabila, is doing his PhD. He decided, which I find commendable, by the way, and I really, I liked it because he went on to have, he went in the military, he didn't have time to, he became president, but he didn't study. So he took his time after presidency to get a master's degree, and now he's doing a PhD. And his PhD, it's about the competition between China, Russia, and the US, and its impact on Africa. And I look forward to reading it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. I'm just going to say Rosemary, do you have anything you'd like to respond to any of those before we finish? Yeah?
Just a final comment.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry, I don't need yours. I can.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I tend to find these conversations, by the time we are done, sometimes we're not, it's a little bit depressing. Because we unpack so many violations, so much hurt, so much that is going on in the worlds that we are working with. I want to finalize by saying, we see so much hope. We see so many people putting their lives on the line for others. And I don't see this on BBC and CNN and Kenya Nation newspapers, right? And I love that you talked about the narrative. Yes, of course we must report on all this that is wrong with us. It is human nature. I love UCP because we then start reporting that we are not just sitting there and being victims, that we are survivors, that we have agency, that we will hold you accountable, that we will learn from you, that we will work together, that we will be able to move things forward. This is what I think is the most powerful thing about UCP. And research like this starts putting light. When I started working on UCP, we didn't really work with Rachel's and the Berries. Well, a little bit with Rachel because she's worked on the ground. But academia was up there. Those guys write on community self-protection strategies. Who knows whether it has anything to do with what we're doing on the ground? They're there and we are down here. This kind of engagement and coordination, where I learned personally, and Berit and Rachel talked about how we met in Myanmar many years ago. By now you figured out I'm one of those very passionate, I tell you, and I would be, and I'm just going, and the communities, and they said this, and this is what needs to be done, and the military, and neither Rachel or Berit would go, oh, you're talking about proactive engagement of the community. I'm like, yeah, that word. You got it. And between us, I think we then get people to take us seriously, get people to pay attention to what we are doing. The combination of practitioners and academia, people in the media, HRDs, everybody out there. The communities get to see their work. You should see some of the impact in the communities in Myanmar when they participated in a participatory action research. A young man was asking there, can we separate between research for academic papers and this one done by the communities? The communities participated. They did not just give data. They themselves participated in the research, looked at their research findings, then changed the actions that they were going to put in place based on what they had found, learned from it, made mistakes, got back, looked at the findings of the second phase and the third phase. And I'm so excited about this. And I've been, I was telling Berit and Rachel on dinner the other day, I've been telling my team, let's be the light. And let's be the light. And when do you see the light best? When it is dark. When the sun's going down, maybe. I hate driving when the sun's going down. But when it's dark, my lights work well. And in human beings, when I see your light, it makes me brave enough to light my light. And that's what I hear from communities on the ground, that they now think, I am not alone. I can do this. I can move forward. Let us collaborate. Let's move forward. Let's own this. And then the civilians will stand. They'll see we are standing with them. They're not alone. And then we'll go to the African Union and ask them, come on, guys. Sorry. Thank you. That's mine.
Thank you.
Did you have something?
In order that I put on some 2 very short footnotes. We are the academia that Rosemary is talking about there in the ivory tower. But I think it is important to recognize the role or the paradigm shift of placing the people at the start and at the center, and tie that up with what Rosemary said earlier, that conflict is inevitable, but violence is not inevitable. If we put the people at the center, then we recognize that it's about a competition of perspectives, a competition of ideas, a competition of the nation we want to be. And so the conversations do not have to wait until there is violent conflict, that in fact the safe spaces are going to be more readily discovered and sustained when there is participation by the people from the very beginning. My country is having a problem with that. My president has been very angry, going on the stumps, complaining about the judiciary, which is nullifying things that the Kenya government is doing. The latest having happened only this morning, that the president is trying to run with some projects, some assignments, but he's being stopped because he has not consulted the people, and the courts are telling him, what you're doing is unconstitutional, go back to the people. I think that that is very important. And if you look at the track record of this country, you will realize that over the past 13 years, there have been efforts to tinker with the Constitution, but they have failed at each and every stage. The Independence Constitution, which was very much an offshore kind of effort, was transformed a dozen times within the first 12 months, and brought us into a situation that has been driving the conflict that we talked of in the earlier years. So yes, have the people at the center, have them at the forefront, recognize that conflict is about competition of ideas, competition of perspectives, of thoughts, and that they can be resolved without engaging in violence. I thank you.
Thank you all very, very much. I think you'll agree that we've wanted to look at challenges and opportunities for UCP across Africa, and I think we've heard about many, from engaging with states, intergovernmental organisations, the challenges of policy, the challenges of governance. So, as well as all of the many community issues that we've talked about, let us not forget there are some other, the wider context, but also the opportunities, and maybe we can remember that we should be the light. Thank you so much, all of you.
Thank you so much to our panelists. I think they deserve another round of applause. So I think we all need a break. We could have a coffee break just out here and then come in for our final session. Or if you would prefer to continue, I'm happy to continue. Let's take a coffee break, yes, yes. To check, just to check, is Arthur Okwemba in the room? Okay, and Philip Muhatia? Great. Prof. Wilson Ugangu? He's not here, so you come in. And Abjata Khalif? Perfect. So please just take the stage so that we can kick off the discussion. So we'll kick off the discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are you feeling energized, or you're feeling now a bit... The petrol is a bit... We thought that we are now going to add the petrol because this is what you're going to carry back. They always say the last message is the best. Yes, we are happy this afternoon to have with us. You remember since day one, yesterday up to today, communicating, changing the narrative. How do you engage the community? How do you get their voices? How do you able to actually influence policy? What was coming up always? Communication. And communication is critical. And it has seen some of us actually in the media world, and me and Wilson, we wrote a book on reporting on conflict in Africa. And it shows that one word, remember when community in Cameroon was saying silence was a means of communication? One word can mean something to another community, and one word can actually mean war to another community. So how you communicate becomes critical. So this afternoon, before the roundtable starts, Wilson is not with us. We are lucky to have Arthur Okwemba, the Executive Director of the Africa Women and Child Future Service. We also have Philip Muhatia from Pamoja FM, and Abjata Khalif, who has actually been able to work effectively in the northeastern region and also in the marginalized community. But before we start, because the media was being challenged, the media was being actually say, what are they doing? One thing people don't know is that just like doctors, reporters also come face to face with those traumatized situations when they report, and they also get affected. What about them? And who are the brave, actually, journalists who are able to also go like the warriors and also the UCP community, that despite the challenges they risk, they go and report and bring back to the public what's happening at the ground. And that's the media, and that's some of us who are here. So we are so lucky to have Alex Chamwada, who has been able to go, global, actually, media person, who has been able to report development journalism in a way that changed society. Through him, we've been able to see how community are transformed, how community has been able to actually take up this issue and come up with what we call community solutions to their problem. So without much ado, let me just invite Alex to kickstart this session, like opening remarks. Then he'll sit here when the roundtable starts. Alex, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. You are low, is it because of the lunch? Good afternoon again. Yeah, thank you so much, panel. Before you proceed, I'm privileged to share one or two words, and Rosemary just ambushed me. I don't have any notes, but I think I'll try, speak from my heart, so that I think then it will appear genuine because I don't have notes. It will be coming from my heart. So my name is Alex Chamwada. I used to work in the newsrooms. I think I worked as a journalist for over 20 years. And then I decided to quit. I just quit. I worked for Royal Media Services. I worked for the Standard Group. And KBC, I began with KBC. I have background in radio production, radio presentation, and television. I worked for KTN, and Citizen TV. So I quit my job in 2014, and I've been running a media company called Chams Media. Chams is from my name, Chamwada, so the short form, C-H-A-M-S, not Cham, not C-H-A-R-M. Yeah, but I'm charming. Yeah, so I've been doing stories away from what I would ordinarily be doing in the newsroom. My vision was to tell what I would call the other story. I was just having a discussion with Arthur. Yes, newsrooms, we are doing a good job telling the stories of the day. They are likely to be about conflict. It's likely to be about politics. And in the newsroom, we believe sensation sells, you know, and we are craving for ratings. I would struggle so much to tell the positive story, and which I believed in when I was a journalist, because I'm pushed to do the top story, and the top story is about politics, the top story is about conflict. Not that they don't matter, but yes, we need to see the news of the day, maybe for half an hour, an hour, but is there room to tell the other story? You see, I believed that you can change so much, and I believed I have the power of the microphone, I have the brain, I have the exposure, I have networks. How can I use my skills? How can I use my networks to help transform the society? Because while traveling even outside the Kenya, I would see so many positive stories, but they would rarely find space in the bulletins. Why? One, the development story or the positive story, it's likely to take longer to produce. It's likely to be more expensive. You are sending me to Turkana County to tell you about stories of resilience, how despite the drought, people are doing irrigation. It's likely to take longer, and maybe the editors are under pressure to churn out content every day. So that's why. Second, they are likely to say it's not so commercial, that sensation will attract numbers, viewership, so that you get advertisers. Development story is unlikely to give you the numbers. I want to thank my mentors like Dr. Barak Muluka, who is here. Let's clap for him. Rosemary herself, when I quit, you know, this is quite a coincidence, Prof, and I really like this coincidence. They encouraged me, don't drop the ball. It may be tough, but you will grow this idea, and one day you'll get partners, you'll get people supporting you, and there is lots of development stories out there. And the model is not to make money from ratings, but you can sustain running the media through partnerships. So we've done very well in getting partners, especially development partners. We've worked with World Bank, UNDP, UNEP, to tell the positive story. So I'll give you an example. In Lodwar, I established an office there. We have a bureau, and I've trained the locals. So I use the locals, like the Turkana, train them to be journalists, to tell the story, videographers. So while the mainstream media will be telling about the hunger, conflict, and so on, we always say there is some positive story. And when we tell positive stories, we're encouraging people to work. We're encouraging investment so that that area doesn't continue dwindling, because when there is hope, then you are helping to build that society. You're encouraging children to go to school. You're encouraging someone to go to the farm, because there are many projects that are unreported. There are development partners that have gone into irrigation. So there are people feeding themselves. While we are seeing people dying, but somewhere there are people feeding themselves. So that's an example of what we've been able to do. We've reported resilient stories in Rwanda, Burundi, South Sudan. We went to a place called Old Fangak in South Sudan, where there is no any motorized transport. And how we landed there, of course, through a development partner is, you know, by plane. But now once you're on the ground, you won't find a motorcycle, you won't find a vehicle, nothing. And it's wide, large area, large region. So moving from place to place, we are using a boat, and there's a journey we did for 5 hours on a boat. So experiencing that and telling that despite that, people are fishing, people are going on with their lives despite whatever may be happening there. So you expose the lives of people that are unreported to the world to see, and maybe someone will land there and see what to do with those people. Those are just some of the examples maybe I wanted to share. In a nutshell, yes, I quit the newsroom, and I think I'm happy what I'm doing. I was joking with the other that I think I look more healthier than other, and their colleagues were stressing me in the newsroom on a light note. But what I'm known for, again, is a program called Daring Abroad. This is about Kenyans living and working abroad. Again, through our effort, we've been able to comb so many parts of the world, from Australia to the US, Europe, Middle East. In the Middle East, we were able to tell people that despite the only story we hear is about the negative stories, the house helps being, harassed. But we find Kenyans in the milk sector. There are about 2,000 Kenyans in the milk sector there. Some are managers. So we bring out the other story. But yes, we have a commercial angle to what we do. There are some stories that are, of course, paid for, and we work with the partners who want to buy airtime. So we do documentaries, features, but we don't tell lies. Even if we are doing PR and commercial stories, that's what we do. And we work very closely with the mainstream media also to give them stories. So that's what we do. For Daring Abroad, it airs on NTV Kenya, and we are also very strong online. So you'll find our stories on Chams Media TV YouTube channel. I think, Rosemary, I may talk forever. You know me. When I take a microphone, I may never finish. And thank you so much for listening to me. I think we need to hear the panel. Asanteni sana.
I don't think we need to sit there because I know that people have got so many questions to ask.
Graduating.
Yes, yes. So with us, thank you, Alex. And many times when you listen to you, you say that's the voice of reason and positivity. Not that other journalists are not telling good story, but positive storytelling is the key thing for the future, actually communicating. So it's my pleasure to introduce Arthur Kwemba, the Executive Director of the Africa Women and Child Feature Service, who is going to talk to us about, remember gender kept on coming, the other voices, the marginalized voices. Just talk about his work under this program and what he's been able to do, and how that storytelling has been able to actually empowering the journalists themselves. Oh, Arthur, the floor is yours. Yeah. So I'm giving 5 minutes, because people now will want to.
Okay. The most challenging thing, although we come from the media, we are editors, we are told our main business is to edit stuff to sizes that are able, that the public is able to interact with without a problem. But just to move very fast is, I come from an organization called African Women and Child Feature Service. We are part of this network. And our key role in that network is to communicate the very many intellectual stuff that was being talked about here this afternoon to the common, we call it Mwanainji, but to that common person in the society. When we are being trained, anybody who is here, all these are journalists, when we are being trained, we are told, if you want to communicate effectively, you have to write something that your grandmother will read. Once you write what your grandmother can read and understand, then you have communicated effectively to a professor. So we start from there. And our main role here is to help communicate the work you do. You do fantastic work. And what Professor Atea said yesterday, that work is meaningless unless you communicate it back to the community who are supposed now to use it to better their lives. So we are expected to do that. And as we do that, we look at ourselves like African Women and Child Feature Service. In that communication, we ask ourselves, which populations will benefit most from UCP approaches? And for us are women and children. So we come very heavily with the gender lens, that any intervention we do, anything we do in terms of capacitating the media to be able to be agents of UCP is to look whatever they are communicating through a gender lens. So as an organization, that's one of the major things we are doing under this project. The other one is to capacitate media houses. We did a small assessment when we were training about 12 journalists, and we were surprised. For the first time, they were hearing the name UCP. But there are elements of UCP when you talk to them. Have you heard this? They can relate to them because they have happened in the country. But that concept is not well known in the country. I think 38%, when we did that assessment, only 38% had a fairly good idea about this approach. And I suspect when we send them the invite letter, those are the people who took some time to go and research, try to understand, we are going to be trained on this, so what is it all about? So that's one thing we do, capacity enhancement. The second thing we are doing, we want to document indigenous knowledge, and you have heard, and approaches that have been used in 2 counties, that's Nairobi and Uasin Gishu, where it's Nairobi, Uasin Gishu, and Kisumu, where we have our network partners working and implementing projects. We want to see, have these approaches been used in the past? And if they have been used, have they been successful? And if they have been successful, how do we project them now to the community and say, this has worked, this is a best practice. And we use media to emphasize that in future and moving forward, this is the best way to solve conflict, not the armed way. So that's the other thing we are doing in terms of documentation. Then the last thing is we are supposed to increase conversation around UCP. And you'll be hearing for the Kenyan people in the next few days. We are starting with the Peace Tree Network. We will be going to 2 radio stations to start. We will have started, but we are waiting for this conference to kickstart that, because we wanted whatever this data and everything they have been doing and the findings to be discussed here first before we go out. So we have the first conversation is lined for next week. And we are hoping we'll increase the visibility, conversation, and the acceptance of this as an approach to solving conflict. What I can just tell you as I end, Rosemary, I think I'm more than my 5 or within my 5 minutes. What I can tell you is media is critical. And people who are here who work closely with media in the civil society, in the academia, for you to bring about transformative change, you have to work with media. It's among the 3 critical socializing agents I know of. I know family is one of them, but outside the family, we have the religious leader, we have the education system, and we have the media. The media can make your approaches, your work, to be accepted by communities, or it can make communities to reject it, just based on how that narrative of UCP is designed. So media is very critical. I think we'll be going in detail in those things as we interact in this conversation. So I will stop there, just as a way of introduction of why UCP and media, they are very critical in terms of helping address conflict and ensuring sustainable peace in our communities.
And that's a very good and good presentation. And maybe later on when the questions will be coming, we'd like you to report about actually how the women voices actually needs to be increased within the media, especially during conflict, and what your organization did during the post-election violence. And we'll be looking into that as we come back to dialogue time, question and answer. And I'm not actually passing my colleague Philip, but I'm going to Abjata with an intention. Philip will come in because he's going to be like, I saw you singing Towards a Cake. Philip is one of those who's, the voices of the FM station here is critical. So the voice is like a cream to this roundtable discussion. So, Abjata, you represent what we call the Northern Eastern Association of Media and Correspondence. And your work has been working closely, focusing on post-election violence, focusing on giving people spaces, and also capacity building of the community, not only media, but also community leaders. Can you tell us what your organization has done, but also talk about your role of media in a marginalized community like northeastern part of Kenya?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Abjata Khalif, and I'm from an organization called Kenya Pastoralist Journalist Network, based in northern Kenya. Northern Kenya is a vast, arid land bordering lawless Somalia, so you can understand the challenge which comes from Somalia, trickling into northern Kenya. So I'm from there, and I'm here to share with you how community media, and especially the vernacular one, play a key role in amplifying voices of peacemakers, especially women peacemakers, by giving them platform of engaging the community, engaging key decision makers in traditional governance system. We have a very strong governance system down there. It's called Gather, and that system for a long period of time, it was operating on patriarchal model or system, and based on sustained education, advocacy, and engagement between community media, and especially the vernacular ones. And we started getting vernacular community radio station broadcasting in vernacular language from the year 2000 up to now, okay? And from the year 2000 up to now, we have registered a very, we have experienced, or we have, there's a very big milestone in terms of women demanding for their rights to be included in the decision-making units, in indigenous knowledge units down there at the village level. And one thing which shows the ambassador here mentioned something about indigenous knowledge, okay, and early warning system. That together, when women were allowed to join Gather system, that was the year 2007 after post-election violence in Kenya. They were allowed to participate, to be members, and from that time now, they used their mobilization skills, because in northern Kenya, elders, they just sit down and they say, oh, we are supposed to go and attack village A or village B, and that's all, okay? And no more question, no more what. So now, when women were added or they were included, they were given space in the Gather system. Now, the rule of engagement changed, okay? And now they started asking more questions, questioning actions, and also bring fresh and new ideas. And by doing so now, even youth and other people now started to ask a lot of questions based on based on issues surrounding incitement and some other problem that is advanced by some clan warlords and others, which contributes to interclan strife, bloodbath, mass displacement, and other problems. So they demanded, so in that space, women demanded that we should have a rotational leadership, because leadership is a problem, okay, from village level up to council level, up to parliamentary level, because each clan want to clinch that seat. So they said, no, we should sit down and agree. And they proposed a rotational leadership system whereby leadership will be shared based on clan living in that village or that area. And clan A will take over leadership for a period of 5 years and hand over to clan B. And by doing so, it reduces tension, mistrust, and cases of armed violence came, it came down. The second thing is this. The same gather when women were allowed to join the gather system, the early warning, the early warning and indigenous knowledge system was expanded. To an extent, they report incident, they map their village, bad actors, new people in their village, dangerous people who work with Al-Shabaab, people who are sympathizers to Al-Shabaab, people who are sympathizers to armed militias, armed interclan militia, and also they mapped the people who are procuring small and light weapons from Somalia into those villages. And they submitted those names to Village Security Committee. Village Security Committee, the same thing, they passed the same to District Security Committee. It comes up to Nairobi. And from Nairobi now, if it's a complex thing, it goes up to Addis Ababa, the way the professor said. So the same gather system down there, which which is highly motivated by women membership, came up with those systems which goes from village to Addis Ababa. So it's a big milestone. Okay. The other thing also on UCP, these indigenous people living in northern Kenya, they have a very strong, or they have an attachment to cultural issues and belief, and that one now leads them. Now that one leads us to indigenous knowledge, and indigenous knowledge, the same gather use to handle small disputes, like if there is a fight at the watering point, at the grazing zone, they used to sit down and they say, okay, you are wrong, you are right, and the wrong, they impose fine on an individual. But when women came in now, they said no. Okay, they said no. What we do, we should change our model, and our model is we should work closely with the government. We should work closely with security agencies in addressing the situation and everything, and also using cultural centers at the village level, in using cultural festivals in advancing UCP, like singing songs, doing arts, because I saw the presentation here. It's the same thing happening in northern Kenya, okay, but at the traditional level. Because here, the Hekima and others, based on their research, it was about issue of police brutality, okay, in urban centers. And also down there we have the same, because of the operation against terrorist groups. So they normally use traditional festivals, and in that festival, there are various art, traditional art, and other ceremonies which normally advance UCP and strengthening civilian protection at the village level. And on media now, on media, the community, the vernacular community media gave platform to gather system, which added, which allowed women to participate or to be member of that unit. And by doing so, every week there's a peace program, and also there's a rapid response they normally give on weekly and monthly basis. It's broadcasted through the radio. There's also what is called radio listening group, where all village peace committees, the village gather system, they normally use that media platform in amplifying their voices, issues, and and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abjata. That's very, very good. And last but not least, we'll have Philip. And Abjata, we'd also like you to talk to us about, remember, linking conflict and environment, how women involvement in agribusiness and agri-smart has changed the living of northern Kenya. So, Philip.
Thank you very much. First of all, I just wish to convey my happiness to have such a session or to participate in this particular session today. And I also want to say that I'm happy because I'm operating now between my mentors and the people I aspired to become like them when I was studying media. Somebody like Baraka Muluka, somebody like Alex Chamwada. The people I really aspired to do my work just like them. So here I am, Philip Muhatia. I work for Pamoja FM Radio. Now Pamoja FM Radio is in Kibera. I know we used to call it Kibera those days, but because of the new administrative boundaries and whatever, it was given a constituency, and it is known as Kibra. So don't be confused when you hear Kibera and Kibra. It's the same thing. It is a Nubian word meaning a forest. So on that note, I wish also to now get into it that Alex, even though you are happy to have gone out of the newsroom, but we wish that we had you still working in the newsroom, because I know you will do a lot. But also get it to us that you still come back and mentor many of us so that we can still, push on with the work that you are doing. I'm happy because Alex also has had time to come and mentor us at Pamoja FM Radio together with Arthur Kwemba. So we have really benefited from their knowledge and experience. So thank you very much. Now, Pamoja FM Radio, as I said, is in Kibra, and everyone who reads or get to hear about Kibra, I think many people have called us, nicknamed us the mother of or father of violence, isn't it? Because whenever you read of any violence, conflict, politically, that is, it emanates from Kibra. It goes to the rest of the country. It starts always in Kibra. So I'm privileged to be working in Kibra. And as a radio station, a community radio station, we started in the year 2007, but our footprint, our strength actually gained ground in the year 2008 during the post-election violence. If you read, for those of you who normally make a follow-up on such issues, you'll find that Pamoja FM played a key role in quelling down the violence that erupted just after the pronouncement of presidential results. That was by that time it was between Mwai Kibaki and Raila Odinga. We had a very big, what I could call big violence erupting from Kibera, going down to the rest of the country. Now, that is when we actually played a very big role. You remember, I don't know whether you remember where some youths were uprooting the railway and planting bananas. Can you remember that? Oh, yes. So some of the things that we did during those days, like others said, some of us, we did things that actually we could not know that it is under the CPU. UCP, sorry. Why? Because we would make some messages, appealing messages to these boys not to uproot the railway. If at all, these are some of the challenges that we gave. If at all Kibaki stole the elections, now how comes that you are uprooting the railway? Did the railway participate in the same? We were putting challenging messages to make this youth to reason and understand that actually, even if we had grievances, it was not right for them to uproot the railway. We had some opinion leaders that we brought on radio in our talk shows that appealed to people not to be very violent, not to kill others, just to take their fellow Kenyans as brothers. So that is the role we played. And also, there is a time I can remember we used to operate on a story house in Ayani, X9. And because we had now established good, working relationship with the boys or the youth, when they came to burn down, because it belonged to one of the people that perceived that they were not supposed to be in Kibera. Because by that time, it was that some communities were at stake. One, if you are Kikuyu and you are found in Sarangombe, that is areas perceived to be Odinga's home turf, and then, you will have it rough. So one time, I can remember the youth came actually wanting to burn down that X9 house. And when they found that we were operating from that house, just our appearance and appealing to them, the house survived even up to today. It is still there. So we took an initiative of speaking to these people, making them, them understand the reason to why they have to find better ways of resolving their own grievances. There is an issue that actually, by that time, of course, we were gotten aware. Many journalists were gotten aware because some of them did not have conflict-sensitive reporting, that kind of information, So some of them would find themselves into the same fueling conflict instead of having to get a solution to the same. I remember there was one, I will not mention the person himself, but somebody was reporting that, right now I'm in Lion Sabah, and the Luos from Katuekera have invaded the Kikuyus in Lion Sabah, one of the villages, So you look at the wordings themselves, instead of actually solving the conflict or quelling down the conflict, it is like you are fueling, because if you say Luos from Katuekera attacking the Kikuyus of, Lion Sabah, it is like you are preparing now Luos from other areas to come and assist. So those are some of the things that actually caught us unaware. Now, coming to 2017, 2018, I think through initiatives that Adho Kwemba and the rest are doing, and after we had actually gotten some trainings and mentorships on sensitive reporting, I think we played a very good role, because you look at the happenings in Kibera, that is 2017, and then 2022, I think you can attest to this, that at least we had a very big difference, that we did not have that violence on a high scale like it used to be, meaning that now we were able to tackle this maturely, practically, from the point of understanding that we had enough information and knowledge to deal with this violence. And that is what I can say, even right now, we are able to do that. Now, what did we do? That initially before Pamoja FM, just a certain rumor, a very small rumor emanating from one point, let's say 42 or Kianda, one of the villages in Kibera, will become an issue and affect the whole of the slum. Being a bigger slum in Kenya, then Africa, of course, many people will be affected. So what we have been doing and what we are still doing is, one, is to be sensitive on the ground, one, to diffuse any kind of rumor that might be coming up so that we kill it on the onset before it brings the damage. That is what we are doing. And then something else we are doing is that we are also giving opportunity. Pamoja FM is just like a platform for these youth and slum dwellers to use. One, to convey their messages either to the government, either to other stakeholders who might also assist in handling or tackling them. So it is just like a platform. That is what we are doing. How do we do it? That in our breakfast shows and other shows, we are inviting these opinion leaders, we are inviting these youth, we are inviting the women, we are inviting everybody, all the stakeholders, at least, to have a chat with the community, to give them hope, also to educate or, sensitize them also to understand the need of making Kibera to be safe. Otherwise, then you'll have nowhere to stay. So we are having talk shows. We are running peace messages on radio. We are also organizing peace tournaments amongst the villages in Kibera. We have 13 villages, so we normally organize for peace tournaments just to make people mingle, discuss, chat their way together. And then we are having appeals. Like for example, recently, after the 2022 election, I think we had just a scenario, and I call it a situation, whereby one mosque, the Alaska Mosque, was burned down. And then we had the church also, the PCU church was burned down. And I think from what we understood, it was not, the PCA church in Kibera is mostly used by, mostly, let me put it so, because most of the people using that church, our brothers, Kikuyu brothers, that is their church, most of them. And it is also perceived that people who go to the mosque, which is just adjacent, they are Nubians. And then we have some kiosks around. So I think this was a propaganda that somebody wanted to use so that it can create some conflict between Luos, Nubians, and then Kikuyus. So eventually it becomes a very big thing that maybe one politician will benefit from it. But what we did as a radio station is to get a hold of all these stakeholders. One, we got the Muslim administration who came in and denounced the burning of the church. And then we also brought on board the PCU church and other stakeholders who also denounced the burning of the mosque. We even brought the Baba on board so that he can also clarify what had happened, because of course he's the very prominent. Who is Baba? Baba is Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga is the person, the very prominent politician in Kibera whom we refer to, so we call him Baba. So if you want to do anything politically, you don't come through him, you might not have that access. So we also brought him on board, also to denounce the same, so that people do not perceive this or do not take advantage of this like a very big thing that has happened, take advantage of it and then ban Kibera and the rest of the country. So I think that one also helped to bring down Tembers, because he said this is not a Luo doing. The PCU came in and said, no, this is not our doing. And then the Muslims, through Nubian community, said, no, this is not our doing. So what do? We have to stay together. So as a radio station, I think those are a few things that I have to highlight, but they have really worked for us to make sure that we make Kibera safe. Indeed, Kibera is very safe, madam. If you walk there, don't be afraid. I know when you talk about Kibera, somebody will want to say, no, when I go there, I have to look at my pocket. I also have to look at do I have a watch? They can go with it and whatever. So I'll rest there.
Yeah, Kibera is very safe. That one I know. So I'll hand over to actually my colleague Juliet to now take us through the questions so that, yes, but before the questions, you'll maybe respond to some of the things that are coming from the presentation from Alex, others, as well as our other colleagues. So then a few questions, and then we'll be able to call it a day. But do you agree that media is key? Yes. That without media, UCP is nothing. So do you work with the media alone? So we need also to empower the media and also engage them and also collaborate with them to be able to, not only weekly, but on a daily basis, have a UCP word with them within our stories or within the way we package it through either documentary or through print. Radio is critical. Radio reaches even that person through their phone on the ground. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Okay.
Yes,
sir, I just wanted to add, you had asked a question around gender and how do you engage the media, and I think even as where we sit, we are usually very happy when we see the products. The people we have trained, Abjata, we have trained Pamoja FM on conflict-sensitive reporting from a gender lens. And I can tell you for the Kenyans and even the people from the region, 2022 elections were the best in terms of peace. Media engaged in peace until to a point now, I sit in the Kenya Editors Guild Executive Council, we were being accused of doing so much peace that we forgot justice. So that's now the thing we are struggling with. How do you balance between justice and peace? But I wanted just to speak very fast to one of the key issues that Rosemary has raised. One, why do we focus more on women as peace actors and women as a key agent in UCP? One of the reasons is we realized a couple of years ago, one, women love peace. They don't like armed conflict. It's not a stereotype, it's a fact. And there is both real, not perceived, reasons why women love peace. They love solving conflict through peaceful means. If you see a woman supporting armed conflict, is one of the last resort. Everything has failed. So that's one. The other thing we realized, women possess very strategic knowledge on how to prevent conflicts. But we were not tapping in them. So what we did is, one is in 2022 and in 2027, and just this year, in fact this year, we have started early enough before 2027 in terms of preventing conflict. So we are working with 22 women from 18 counties. We training them on peaceful ways of resolving conflicts. So in 2022, what we did is we trained the women, and they know how to engage with the media, how to message, how to prepare messages. So in that meeting, they prepared messages, peaceful messages, appealing to their communities. And I think most of those messages we ran on the stations of the two teams which are here and the other stations. And it became very critical because these women, they were involved now in the structures, peaceful structures at community level. And what Abjata said, if you look at anecdotal evidence, women transformed a lot of the thinking within those peace committees. When people are saying, no, even vigilante groups, we want to engage these people in an armed way, women could brought new thinking in the approaches that were to take. They were saying, let's try peace. If it doesn't work, then we allow you. And the women peace actors were telling us that was the biggest challenge to them, that their strategy had to work for them to be believed. And in the election, it worked. And I think after the election, the agency of women in peace in this country, and Kenyans will tell you, he has been recognized. Because wherever they engaged, there are things that happened that stopped conflict, and we are enjoying sustainable peace. So I just wanted to add to that. But as I finish, how do you sustain these interventions? What we have done is we have helped media houses to develop gender policies. Once you have a gender policy in place, you are good. After 2017, he told you after 2017 we engaged with them. They have a gender policy. One of the things of the gender policy is promoting the women's voice on critical issues around peace, conflict, development, and governance. And if you look at how they are covering, they are doing extremely well. We have at least 3 stations out of the 9 we have done so far, which are doing a great job. They have even started our own program. We told Philip to in his morning program to be ensuring wherever you bring someone to speak, ensure there is voices of women. So they realized that the people who are getting through, the callings were coming from men. So they have a line specifically for women to call in, and you get more women participation. So I was just saying, agenda policy transforms. And I think that gender policy we can do, what we can do moving forward is the media in the region and see how we can institutionalize UCP through policies, or how do we integrate UCP within their policies that exist, editorial policies that they are using. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we take 2 questions? So we are targeting to finish at 5:10, so we'll take 2 questions. And because we have a very long networking dinner, we're going to ask more questions there. Agreed?
Thank you so much for your presentation. My name is Cicely Gatiti, a commissioner of police, and I'm happy to be here. I've taken a lot of bullets for the police in silence. My question would be on the issue of mainstreaming gender issues, especially on positive reporting by the media. That's a good thing you are doing, and doing in the gender policy. My only question would be, for the longest time ever in this country, especially Kenya, we have not been able to pass the gender bill in parliament. And now I think this is the 14th year since the constitution was passed. And being the parliament that is endowed with to make laws, some of these policies need to be anchored at the national level. The women parliamentarians have tried, they have failed. So how can media, for example, raise the voices of those women? Because they have tried their best, and every time they go to vote in the parliament, there are no men. Men just walk away. And the same has trickled down into security institutions. For example, in the National Police Service, we have embedded the gender issues, but still the gender policy has not been passed, simply because it must be anchored on a law in parliament, which is non-existent. Thank you very much.
So we can answer that, and then we'll take the rest during our break. Or do we have another one? Oh. There.
I think a lady do want to defend their fellow lady. I don't know. Yeah.
No, she can take one more question. We can take one more question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for different role that you are taking and different issues that you are addressing from the media perspective. And coming from the scenario of South Sudan, I know that you are trying to also bringing the voices of women, particularly looking at the participation, inclusivity, and women voices to come out. But I think you are aware about in South Sudan we have that affirmative action for women representation. But building on our scenario, we are not only looking at the participation, but I don't know how can the media play a role in a situation where we are not just looking for that representation of women in terms of that percentage, but we are looking at the effectiveness of that women who is there, even if she's 1 or 2, that can be able to address women issues. So this is a major challenge that we are facing in South Sudan. We have a number of them representing with that percentage, but in most cases they are just silent. They are contributing 0. They are not even talking about the women issues. And most of the media in South Sudan are silent. I don't know what kind of message can you give me, although I'm not from the media, but what kind of message or what kind of skills or material that you can also support us with so that we are able to support our brothers. because we are not for the quantity, but we are for the quality women who can really represent us. Thank you.
I think you can answer those for now. Thank you.
I will answer two, then my colleagues can also respond. One is on the gender policy that Cecily, you are talking about. For the Kenyans who are here, I don't know if you know, just last week, there is a team that has been going around the country picking the views of people on that policy has to be, a law has to be enacted in Parliament to operationalize that policy. And you are right, it is the anchor of everything. So media is critical, and I'm privileged to say that UN Women has chosen us to help bring that conversation to the national level. And you will see it from next week. You will see someone like Barack. I was talking to him. We are bringing people to discuss that. So that's one of the things that they will be doing as an organization, driving that conversation. But the other important thing is the gender policy in the police service. That policy, we participated in it, and it has stagnated at the police service board. As an organization, we helped to develop the guidelines for the gender desk. Gender desks are the ones that where women and children who have been violated is a critical justice system where they start from there to get the justice. And especially women who have been violated during conflicts. So we realized that place didn't have guidelines. And the police, the way you can attest to that, the way they are redeployed. So one works on a station for 3 months, another one is brought. And women were complaining, there is no that consistency in someone following my case. And it was affecting justice at the end. So when we talked to them, we realized there was a gap. So we developed a gender guideline for the desk. The gender guideline and the gender desk and the gender policy, they are now lying at the National Police Service Board. They have not been approved for more than 5 years. And that's what she's just raising. So we are hoping with this conversation, because what I was telling women leaders in one of the meetings, and I think partners here who work around USCP, we have to use populations to put pressure on the powers. You cannot stop UCP top down. You have to start bottom up. And we are saying make the politicians very uncomfortable that if I don't support this policy, I will not be elected. And that's the campaign we are starting now. So that when it reaches Parliament, everyone knows my people in the community are watching how I will vote. And we have told the women in communities, if you feel that your politician is not voting in favor of that, then they are against your progress as a woman. And the majority of the people who vote for these people, see, they are women. Yes, so we want to make them very vulnerable, the MP, that if you don't vote this time around, you will not see that house in the next election. Then lastly is what my sister, what you have raised from Sudan, that there are many women in these very critical structures, but they are not making a huge difference. What we did here, and my position has been, I want more women, and I campaign, but let's go beyond numbers. We cannot just say we have 10 women. What are those 10 women doing? Yes. Are they bringing difference? And it goes back to the selection. So what we have been doing, perhaps journalists can do thereby as an organization, as we go out and fish women who we think they have quality leadership, and we profile them. And we have partnered with media houses. So they are publishing those profiles. There's one woman who told me in 2020, you know, you guys forced me to go into politics, but she won. The public don't know about the quality, these quality women who can bring a difference. Media, we need to project those women. And we do that by profiling them, putting their profiles there, their stories, and their voices. And ask these women, what is your agenda for this community or this country? And put there. Then people start a conversation around that woman. When you start that conversation, that woman starts getting a lot of traction within the society and the community. When election comes and she decides to run, she is already a step ahead of her competitors. So that's the strategy we have done. Last year, we profiled 87 women, 28 were elected. So for us, it was a success. Thanks a lot.
Okay. I think I've said almost everything, and well done. For me, the challenge would be for stakeholders to up their game and keep the issue afloat. Yeah, media will do their bit, but I know there is some element of influence. They are bogged down so much, as I said, with the news of the day, but it takes effort to reach out to an editor, call them for breakfast meeting, sensitize them, so that the issue remains current. You see, we only hear about it when now it's at parliament level, but you need more conversation about it, more public participation, and speak to editors to influence talk shows, so that the talk shows are not just about the normal politics, but issues like those. So effort in terms of keeping the matter afloat, that's what I can add. But I may forget, I was challenged that I should work closely with the media. I belong to media organizations. I'm a member of the Kenya Editors Guild. I'm a member of the media stakeholders. Every media organization, I think I belong to that. And Champs Media, as our entity, is accredited by the Media Council of Kenya. All my journalists in my company, 20 of them, are accredited. And we share a lot. The Media Council of Kenya uses my time, my resources for training. And as you said, I was at Pamoja FM. So I have one foot inside and one foot outside. Thank you.
Actually, my colleagues have nailed it all. I just wanted to add something on the issue of Sudan, especially when it comes to women. I think if you remember what, oh yes, Southern Sudan, thank you. Oh, thank you. As Ada had said before, is that there is a time when we used to conduct our talk shows. Many times you'll find there are only men calling in. We were even wondering, where are women? When we did a research, we found out that, of course, we had a lot of women following our programs. But the only challenge is, one, they were not either motivated. Some of them were afraid to call. Some of them were not able to actually scramble for the few, spaces to get through. Because remember, if we ask Alex and the other here, they will tell you that when we are in the studio, most of our radio station, we don't see who is calling because it is a switchboard. So we just pick the calls randomly. So we cannot tell this one is from a woman so that we can give fair, equal chance to them. So what we did is that we found out that we had issues when it comes to cultural beliefs. Some communities in Kibera did not attribute actually for a woman to speak on radio unless has been authorized by the husband. You have to seek for permission to speak on radio because you are going viral. That is one belief that we need to demystify. Number two, we had others who are just afraid because they believed if I call, then I will look like I'm somebody who is not organized as a woman. I have to treat my whatever, in a very professional and whatever directed way. So, it is a matter of encouragement, it is a matter of sensitization, and then it is a matter of motivation. You do all the three, of course, yes, women will be at par, I know. And in fact, the kind of feedback we are receiving from women in Kibera right now is much better than men. Sorry, men, I know that you will crucify me when I say that, but that is a fact. So it is a matter of motivating, sensitizing, and then you encourage them also to contribute. Thank you.
mine will be short, and partnership is key, especially civil societies in Sudan, in Southern Sudan. You can forge partnership with media, and you organize a regular breakfast meetings, that's monthly or bi-monthly, and you work on an advocacy, media advocacy plan, who to engage, and you utilize or you use radio and TV talk shows in engaging important stakeholders within Sudan, Southern Sudan leadership ecosystem, who will be ally in ensuring that gender parity and inclusivity is achieved. But an example of using media. Okay, I'll give an example, and this one is on northern Kenya, whereby an international organization used the vernacular community radio in educating women on climate smart agriculture and enterprise. And in the past, their role was, they were reduced to milk hawkers and milk hawking, and also cleaning homes and doing manual jobs. And after that training and the link and linking women to agricultural experts, 60 women, they formed a cooperative society. They went to Islamic Sharia Bank. They applied for loan. Okay, they engaged some idle male farmers, and they bought 60 farms from them. Now they're exporting apple. They're exporting apple mango to Qatar. They are now exporting sweet melon to UAE. Okay, so it's a very big stride. It's a very big milestone. So that's the power of media. Yeah, thank you.
Wow, thank you, gentlemen. A round of applause for them. Thank you so much for the conversations, the insights. You may take your seats. We are coming to the end, the almost complete end of our conference. So for the next about 1 hour, you are free. We had organized a campus tour for you, but I understand you may be tired. So basically, you have only been in the business school, and I know you've only been in this room, probably out here upstairs. So one of the things we have in the business school is the Kenya Climate and Innovation Center. It's on the 2nd floor. So Gabriel right there will take you on the tour. So you could begin with the Kenya Climate and Innovation Center on the 3rd floor, sorry. We also have an incubation center at the Student Center that is housed at iLab. iLab is our technology research arm. So that is housed at the Student Center building, just as you come in. We also have, you can take them to iLab, and at the top floor of the STC, I think there's the IBIS Incubation Center, where we incubate entrepreneurial businesses. We could continue the tour to the Energy and Research Center, which is at the farthest corner of the university. There we do all things energy and research. And if you'd like to go for a tour to a mall, there's a mall across on the other side. So you have an hour. I will need you back for dinner in about, if we stretch it too much, an hour, 15 minutes. Okay, and then we come to the complete close. But for our sessions, we are done with our sessions for the 3-day event. Thank you for your time, your patience with me. And I know I have put in very many sessions, but I know it has been worth it from the learnings and the feedback and the reflections that you have given. And I am so honored to be part of the network. Thank you so much. I think I forgot something. Just give me one. So we have some lovely Maasai shukas. We're very famous for this. These are famous with our Maasai tribe in the Rift Valley. So for those who had ordered some, Gabriel right there, already has them, and if you'd want to get yourself one, he's the person to sort you out. Thank you. I think, Gabriel, you can guide us on where you want to start. And for those who want some fresh air, you can show them to Masai Mara. The balcony outside is a good place just to relax your mind and just chill.
Thank you so much, Juliet, for your time.